Welcome to Friday night's video in our second master series. This is the 13th video in our second master series and the second video in looking at our spectrum meters. So hopefully if you've watched all the videos so far and done the things I was trying to tell you to do, that you probably have a pretty good understanding of the importance of those things and how important those things are going to be for you to be able to understand the simple tool that your spectrometer is so that you can utilize it well. You know, you have to really understand when we're looking at spectrometers in the DAW that it's not rocket science, you know, and we're really trying to work with something that's not quite so finite as building a rocket ship. So we don't really need sometimes a whole lot of information that is going to be of absolutely no use to you, you know, trying to work on a music production, depending on how delicate of work you're doing for what type of a production. I mean, we talked about we're basically looking for the harmonics, how to find them, what even an odd harmonics are, so we can, you know, see them. We talked about harmonic distortion that might be inherent in some type of waveform or something we're working on, so we want to be looking for it. We talked about noise, you know, and what that is, you know, and being able to map that out. So we got a pretty good understanding of what noise is, what shapes they are. And so we have a good understanding of those are the primary things we're looking for, besides things like frequency modulation and volume modulation, so that we can see things happening in that domain that may be issues in certain situations. And we talked about mapping out different sounds, vocals, bass note, piano notes, possibly chords, whatever, so that you know what a norm is. You know, you got a good sound and capture that you've worked on, and then you've taken a picture on a spectrometer and you've mapped it out really well. And we talked about that the biggest importance is going to be the most fundamental harmonics inside of that sound envelope. And understanding it's going to probably drop into whole steps, half steps, quarter steps, and so on and so forth as it diminishes into the sound floor, and to be able to work on them and have a good picture of what the norm is of them so that we're able to, you know, enhance things, fix things, and work on things with a knowledgeable understanding of what the heck we're looking at, so we can see that there might be harmonic distortion and harmonic sinusoid here that's harmonic distortion, or noise way up here where it's not supposed to be, or whatever's going on, hiss going on here, rumble down here, the noise floor too hard, your sideband distortion with the harmonics looking way too wide and thick, you know, sideband distortion coming up on it too high, things like that. So we have an an informed understanding of what we're looking for, so that our analysis tools have some purpose and are useful to us. So that was pretty simple. And when we get into the DAW, the spectrometer is a pretty simple tool. You know, when we get in there, then we're looking for some pretty basic information. We can sidechain in if we want to take and look at other, you know, waveforms while we're mixing, look at them separate, and we can have another spectrometer on after it to see what they look like separate, what they look like mixed together. I might have duplicated this track and have it on another track so I can see when I attenuate and boost things, what they look like differently, how they sound differently from what I've done. Things like that. You know, my EQ, I love my EQ because I chain my EQ. I love my equalizers because I love doing this. I can look at them separately, put another one after it, look at what they would look like mixed together, or listen to it, be able to find issues as I'm mixing or when I'm trying to enhance or fix things. If I'm fixing it correctly and what I was focused on, to go focus on, well, that wasn't a problem, maybe it's over here. And I'll go over and focus it on over here, be able to see what it looks like, to be able to really visualize what's going on. But the actual spectrometer isn't showing you it's not that difficult to understand. You know, we basically got a crosshair to show us where we're at, so we can see what frequency we're at, what note we're basically possibly at, and the level that basically we're looking at. Does that make sense? And we've got another angled one that's going to show us a 3 dB per octave gradient. That's a good reference that can show you that's a good reference for sometimes getting an idea of how far things are sloping off. If they're sloping off too far, that's normally it's supposed to be a good reference for mixes. That can be very debatable, but if it's getting way out of whack of that you might have a problem when you're mixing, because when you've got a good full mix together, that gradient is going to slope off some. if you look at the equal loudness contour, that can come into play and override that information very quickly depending on what you're working on, but it can be very helpful in some situations. And we're looking at dBFS over here, dB full scale, from 0 down into the noise floor. And that's a very simple, concept. If you got 0 dBFS, you're going to get clipping that you don't want. You want to be underneath that. So, and then it's showing you the levels going down there so you can see, what's happening with the harmonics and whatever you might be looking for, harmonic distortion, noise flow, saturation down in here, whatever might be happening, to get a good idea where it might be, if it's a problem, if it isn't a problem, and things like that, what the levels are, and isolating it and listening to it by itself and things like that. And we've got some channel information here that can show us the left or the right channel, left plus right, and or the difference between the right and left channel that might be helpful in some situations. Now we get into here, and this is a detail, the amount of detail we might need for information. So let's say that we're getting in here and we'll start out with the octave. This is showing per octave, the levels, so if you, depending on how finite or how detailed of information you need to get something done, you might be able to get it done with this information. You might not need it any more detailed than that. You might need it like 3 per octave. You got 3 of these per octave. That's giving you a little bit more detailed information of what's happening through the spectrum. You can get a little bit more information, 12th octave. This will show you the individual notes, that are happening there. So between 20 hertz and 20 kilohertz, that you have a really good idea musically what notes and frequency content is being applied in there in that level of detail might be all you need for what you're doing. Then you can go into fine detail like an FFT. An FFT, fast forward transform, is going to give you some really fine detail about all the stuff we're looking for to be able to really map it out and find norms and find issues, and while we're sculpting, enhancing, or repairing things, of what's happening. And sometimes you'll get like an FFT curve, which basically is the smoothed version of the FFT, because sometimes you might only need that smoothed version to get done what you're doing. You're doing much broader strokes with your paintbrush, and attenuating and boosting or whatever you're doing, that you don't need as detailed information. That the FFT curve is going to work fine for whatever you're doing. You got things like your waterfall is the same thing. It's giving you the same information, but a little bit differently. You look at this frequency here, and then you're looking at the frequency modulation, sideband distortion, and things like that are actually happening here at this level of quality. As you go up in quality, it's going to give you finer detail. So really keep that in mind whenever you're looking at things like that you think you got a mess, when if you get a little finer detail, there ain't no mess there at all. So be real careful of that. But those are some different ways to look at it. You can see distortion, low end rumble, high end hiss, maybe problems happening a little bit differently to help you really target what might be an issue or something you're trying to work on a little bit differently, to help you visualize it a little bit differently. And the same thing with a sonogram. Sonogram can do the same thing, just helping you visualize it a little bit differently. If you're really trying to find some issue or something going on, that you can really get in there and zoom in there and find out what's happening. Maybe freeze it, zoom in on some certain area and go, what is going on there? Or I got a problem here, I want to enhance that, or what, and just look at it a little bit differently, to get the work done you want, the basic same information. And then you have a quality here. You look at this here, it's like a block size, 512 block size, that's only going to give you that detailed information on an FFT or fast Fourier transform. If you go up here, that it's going to give you really fine detail. But depending on the power of your computer, it might go a little slow because it's trying to get some really fine detail of what's happening there. Then, besides that, we're looking at a couple other things. Peak hold times. You might want to look at peak hold times to see what those peaks are. Stop the music and really map out what's going on here, what those peaks are on the sideband distortion, frequency modulation, or the main frequency, what their peak hold times. You can map out what's going on there really well, where the harmonics are going across there. Does that make sense? Or an average of them. You might want an average of them and really be only concerned of an average of them, because you might be working with averages rather than peaks while you're mixing or you're working on something. We talked about that in the first master series, that sometimes an average is a better way of looking at something depending on how you're mixing and how much dynamics are happening, that you're going to an average rather than a peak because of way too much dynamic fluctuation. And we're going into levels. This is a pretty simple thing, that if I go down into here and I fix this, and I'm looking down here, I've got all the way down to negative 144 dBFS, then I don't need to see all this noise floor maybe. Does that make sense? And so it's like, there's no point to that. I might want to cut some of that out because I don't really want to focus on the harmonic content here, and I don't need to have it all the way up here with the noise floor all the way up here on my screen to be seeing all that. So that's, you can also, you might bring the level down some. You might be trying to focus between here, and here for some reason, and so you can set these levels there to really, zoom in on some area for some reason. And frequency content, you might be trying to zoom in between, say, 500 hertz and and maybe 2K. For some reason you're trying to focus in there, you're going to increase quality, you're looking at it that way. You might look at the sonogram, the FFT curve in a few different ways, trying to really visualize something that's going on. And so you can break it up there, to really kind of zoom in on what's happening. That's basically the basic things that you're really looking at on your spectrometer. And I've found that for most people, it's really a lot more important that they understand the other things that we've talked about so far in this series, so that this simple device can give you the information you need, and you're not just looking at something that just makes no sense to you. You see this stuff and you go, well, what does that mean? I understand that, but I haven't got no use for it. And so they throw half their tools, which is their eyeballs and their meters, and their analysis tools, that once you understand what you're looking for from watching the previous videos, that the actual thing you're looking for isn't that difficult. The concept isn't that much. It can get really detailed, and there are some very complicated things happening here, but if you keep the things we talked about in mind, and you're focusing on what you understand from doing the things I've talked about so far, and learning about those things and understanding them, that when you pull out your spectrometer, that it's something that's very useful to you, that can really help you to take you to the next level, so that you can pull it out when you have any issue that it's like, what is that? Something up in here, I've got this harmonic going on here, I got my noise floor too high, I've mapped out things that are going on in sounds, and that noise floor is not normally all the way up in here, bro, or I've got too much harmonic hiss, or low end rubble, or the harmonic distortion, or the harmonic levels aren't situated the way they're normally supposed to be, and things like that. Then it can be very important, once you understand what you're looking for, that this tool is amazingly helpful to help you do really good detailed work, so that you can take your stuff to the next level, because this little harmonic being that much louder than that harmonic may be a problem. And you understanding that, and being able to understand what you're looking at, what you're doing, then being able to go, oh, well, now this tool is gold, bro. This tool is gold for me, dude. I just figured out that now I know this harmonic, these two harmonics should be down about here, and they're not, they're way up there. And so I'm going to put some type of, I'm going to squish them down, or they're too low, I'm going to boost them up, or I'm going to have to put a higher low pass filter on here, or no, then basically I need to do it a little bit differently, dot, 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 dot. So this tool is immensely helpful once you understand those other things, and once you understand the simple tool that it is most of the time when you're working in music productions. And if you get more elaborate ones that you buy, great, bro. If you buy a $6,000 desktop one, great. But try not to get so lost in the audio engineering that you eventually quit doing music and get lost. I'm not dissuading you from doing that. You might. I did for a long time because I just loved it. I really got into it. But if you're working on music, now you understand the simple tool it is. We talked about the other things that you need to be looking for and you need to understand, so that this simple tool, it can be invaluable to you to take you to the next level. So peace, hope, love. I hope you enjoyed this second video in our spectrometers, and I will see you in the next video.